A solid island just disappeared. It was gone from the map. For over 100 years, every chart in the world showed this place, Sandy Island, out in the Pacific. The maps insisted it was there. Then a research ship went to the exact spot, and it found nothing, just open ocean. That's where this starts. It opens up a deeper history, a hidden one. You begin to see the map differently. It's not a fixed thing, it's a record of what people wanted, what they were afraid of, what they imagined. Whole countries of era got drawn onto the globe, born from stories, from rivalry, and once they were on the page, they stuck. They refused to go away. So the question becomes, how do you finally erase something when everyone is convinced it's real? A sailor in the 16th century, holding a quill by candlelight. His ship is moving in a dark sea, a storm outside. He's trying to draw a coastline he only saw in glimpses. That was the raw material of a map. It wasn't science then. It was an art of desperate approximation. One missighting in bad light could create a whole new land. That's the real nature of cartographic error. It wasn't usually a simple mistake. It was a slow, cumulative process. One mapmaker's cautious guess gets drawn on parchment. The next mapmaker copies it. That copy is seen as confirmation. A fact to be refined, not questioned. Over decades, a phantom coastline hardens into accepted reality. Historians like John R. Habert point out that before satellites, mapping relied on a fragile trio. Dead reckoning, which was educated guesswork based on speed and direction. Celestial navigation, which needed clear skies and precise timing, and often sheer luck. The errors this produced weren't random. They were systematic, longitudinal miscalculation. Figuring out how far east or west you were at sea was the great puzzle of the age. A mistake in your longitude could plot an island hundreds of miles from its real location, and once it was placed wrong on a respected chart, that wrong location became its home. This created the Chinese copy problem, a term map historians use. An error on a Dutch map gets faithfully reproduced on a French one, then an English one. Each iteration lending it more false authority. Sometimes the error wasn't a miscalculation but a mirage, distant banks of clouds on the horizon, or massive tabular icebergs with flat, land-like tops. They could perfectly masquerade as solid ground to a hopeful or weary crew. The Isle of Demons is an example, a place that haunted maps off Newfoundland for centuries. It was likely a persistent misreading of fog-shrouded rock formations, their shapes twisted by storm light into something mythical, so these phantom islands weren't lies. They were ghosts of imperfect knowledge, born from optical illusion and copied into permanence. It makes you wonder, in our own age of digital perfection, what modern maps are we trusting? What systems do we see as flawless that future generations might look back on and see as a landscape built on our own unique forms of error? That ghost of error was one kind of phantom. But there was another source much stronger. It wasn't from misreading clouds or a math mistake. It came from the stories we told. Imagine an old sailor by a tavern fire, his voice low. He talks about an island to the west, a blessed isle where heroes rest, its shores always hidden in mist. That's Avalon. Or he whispers of a land at the edge of the world, a frozen place called Thule, where the sun hardly rises. These weren't just stories, they were instructions. For the map makers, the blank spaces on the parchment were an invitation, and they filled them not with unknown, but with belief. They didn't consult explorers, they consulted ancient books, writers like Pliny the Elder, who compiled fantastic accounts of distant lands, became trusted authorities for over 1,000 years. If Pliny wrote of a race of people with their faces on their chests, a mapmaker would draw that race in the appropriate corner of Asia. This was the world of the Hereford Mappa Mundi, a map from around 1300. It shows Jerusalem at the center, and at the very edges of the known world, you find the Garden of Eden itself, drawn as a real, physical place you could theoretically sail to. Or the kingdom of Prester John, a mythical Christian ruler thought to be waiting with a vast army in the east, ready to aid Europe. These were plotted with the same care as London or Rome. The line between sacred geography and physical geography didn't exist. That cultural weight turned legend into ledger. Take High Brassel, a phantom island said to lie off the coast of Ireland. Its myth was specific. It was cloaked in fog, only becoming visible once every 7 years. That detail was its genius. When an expedition failed to find it, that wasn't proof it wasn't real. It was proof you had simply missed the right day. The legend explained the absence, which only reinforced the belief. Then there's St. Brendan's Island, born from the voyages of an Irish monk. His tale, a mix of faith and adventure, described finding a paradisiacal land far out in the Atlantic. For centuries, this island appeared on charts as a real destination. Well into the age of exploration, ship captains got orders to search for it. They were chasing a story, a spiritual destination that had solidified into a cartographic fact. That's how belief writes itself onto the map. It creates a place so compelling in the human imagination that its absence from the physical world becomes the problem, not the other way around. And once that belief gets tangled with ambition, with national pride, it opens the door to something darker. Not just hopeful error or faithful transcription, but the deliberate craft of a lie. The map became a weapon. In Lisbon, in Madrid, in London, the people drawing maps weren't just scribes. They were intelligence officers. It was a race for empire, and a map was your blueprint. It was also a screen, something to hide your real plans from your rivals. This was competitive cartography. The deliberate lie entered the record. Map historian Chet Van Duzer talks about a kind of cartographic fraud nations practiced. They would plant a phantom island on their secret charts. The goal was twofold. You could mislead a competitor's fleet, send them searching an empty ocean. Or you could create a false buffer, a claimed territory that pushed another nation's perceived boundary farther away. This was strategy drawn in ink. On land, mapmakers had long used paper towns, fictitious villages. If a rival's map showed that same fake town, it was proof of plagiarism. That practice sailed out to sea. They became paper islands, an invented coastline, a strangely named rock. It was a trap for copycats. It protected the value of the original chart, and that market was fierce. A new map showing a rumored paradise, a shorter passage to the Spice Islands, that could make a publisher's fortune. The pressure to be first, to be exciting, led to a dangerous game. Unverified sailor reports got rushed into print. Sensational features were added, not for accuracy, but for sales. A clear example is Los Jardins, the gardens. This group of islands started appearing on Spanish charts of the Pacific in the 16th century. They were a declaration. By putting them on the map, Spain was staking a claim to that stretch of ocean. It was a warning. Expeditions were sent to find them. They found only water, but for generations the islands persisted. Their existence defended not by evidence, but by the sheer weight of geopolitical desire. So the phantom was no longer just a mistake. It was a deliberate fiction, sanctioned by kings, traded for gold. It makes you pause. In our own world of information, what are the modern Los Jardins? What strategic falsehoods do we accept because they serve a powerful narrative, because they're printed on the maps of our digital age? That competitive pressure created a landscape where fantasy could flourish. But to finally erase these ghosts, you needed more than a skeptical captain. You needed a new way of seeing the world, a system that left no room for the old illusions. Frisland was the most stubborn ghost in the North Atlantic. It wasn't a small thing, it was a huge, detailed landmass. It had bays and mountains and rivers, It was on the best maps for more than 200 years. It started with a map published in Venice in 1558. That map came with a wild story. The story came from the descendants of the Zeno brothers. They were Venetian nobles. They said they had an old family manuscript. It described a secret voyage from the 14th century, a voyage to the North Atlantic. The account talked about an island, a wealthy, advanced island named Frisland. The map that went with it was intricate. It was shockingly precise for how old it was supposed to be. It felt real. That was its power. Historians today think the Zeno story was a clever forgery. Maybe it was meant to boost Venetian prestige, but in the 16th century it was a bombshell. The map's supposed age gave it an authority that was almost impossible to challenge. If this was a record from 150 years earlier, it had to be a truth lost to time. The details were so specific. How could it be wrong? That question trapped people. It trapped generations of brilliant minds. The great mapmakers studied it. People like Gerardus Mercator, Abraham Ortelius, they trusted its pedigree. So when they made their own masterworks, they incorporated Frisland. They gave it shape. They refined its coastlines. Each new publication wasn't just copying an error. It was a scholarly endorsement. Frisland was now in the canon. It had the blessing of the most respected names. That created a paralyzing problem for sailors. Navigational charts started to show two large islands, Iceland and Frisland, often placed confusingly close together. The phantom began to warp reality. The English explorer Martin Frobisher sailed in 1576. He was partly looking for a northern passage to Asia. In the thick fog and ice, he sighted a rugged coastline. He consulted his maps. His maps showed Frisland as a major feature. He likely believed he had found it. Historians now, looking at his logs, think he was probably seeing the southern tip of Greenland, but the ghost on the map told him he was somewhere else. His entire understanding of his position was skewed. His future course was skewed by a fiction. Frisland's persistence actively hindered the accurate mapping of the real North Atlantic. For centuries, it was a perfect storm. A compelling, detailed forgery met scholarly acceptance that created a feedback loop, a loop of false confirmation. Every ship that failed to find it in the wrong place just proved the maps needed adjusting, not discarding. The island became a fact by consensus, a lesson in how authority can cement a story. Cement it into the bedrock of our world. To finally dismantle a fiction like that, you needed a new kind of proof, something colder, more objective than a sailor's log. More objective than a scholar's interpretation. You needed a system that looked at the world without stories, without wishful thinking, a system that simply recorded what was there. The ocean was always creating illusions. In that huge, empty blue, the mind wants something to hold onto. It finds something, even if it isn't there. You see it in old ship logs. A ship caught in a storm, the crew looking out, and they see a dark shoreline through the rain. They note the position, grateful for something real, and by dawn it's gone. Just open water. So many phantom islands started like that. A real sight but misunderstood. The sea made these false offers. One of the strongest was the Fata Morgana. That's a complex mirage from layers of warm and cold air bending the light. It doesn't just waver, it constructs. A flat line of horizon can become cliffs or castles, whole chains of islands floating in the sky. To a crew dying of thirst, it looked like rescue. They'd sail for it, watching that impossible land stay ahead of them until it faded into the haze. Then there were the simpler tricks, a giant, flat-topped iceberg drifting for years. Its top, covered in rocks and dirt from a glacier, could look exactly like a barren island from far off. Or a huge raft of pumice stone, floating after a volcano erupts underwater, could seem like a solid gray coast. Even the tides helped. A coral bank or a sandbar might only show itself at the very lowest tide. A ship passing right then would chart an island. A ship a day later would find deep water and think the first crew was mistaken. There was Sarah Ann Island. In the 1800s, several good captains said they found it in the Central Pacific. They gave precise coordinates. Whalers met there, but when other ships went to that spot, there was nothing. Maybe it was a pumice raft that finally sank, maybe a recurring Fata Morgana in that area, or just a buildup of small navigation errors, each new report drifting toward the last. We'll never know. The ocean took the proof back. This constant deception made checking the hardest part. You couldn't trust just your eyes, you needed something else. A method that could see past the mist and the mirage, something to tell the solid from the ghost. That method, when it came, wouldn't come from the sea. It would come from above. The ghost islands needed to be seen first, and often that was a man on a whaling ship. The ship itself was a floating factory. Slick with oil and blood, the air was cold, sharp with salt and the smell of burning blubber from the trypots. These crews weren't explorers, they were industrial hunters. Out for years at a time in the most remote waters, places no navy had charted. Their world was profit and survival, but when a lookout shouted, "Land ho!" from the crow's nest that could change the map, the whalers and sealers of the 18th and 19th centuries became the eyes on the frontier. But their vision came through a specific lens. They were a crucial source of new geographic data, and they were deeply unreliable. Maritime historians look at their records. A whaling captain's log was a private business document. It tracked barrels of oil, the weather, the location of prey. A note about land was often secondary. Scribbled between entries about a successful kill, coordinates were taken with whatever instruments were on hand, often in punishing conditions. A sighting might be noted as high land to the southward in a gale. Back in London or New Bedford, a cartographer in a warm office would take that vague phrase and translate it into a solid line on a chart. A dashed, speculative line might become a firm coast in the next edition. There was also an incentive to exaggerate. Reporting a new island, a safe harbor, a seal breeding ground could mean discovery rights. It could mean your name on the map, a commercial advantage for your nation or your company. So a large tabular iceberg seen through fog could become a confirmed island in a report home. Take New South Greenland. In 1823, the American sealing captain Benjamin Morrill returned from the Southern Ocean with an astonishing tale. He claimed to have sailed along a vast coastline, hundreds of miles long, teeming with wildlife. He gave coordinates and named it. For decades after, New South Greenland haunted the Antarctic charts. Expeditions were launched to find it, to map it. They found only pack ice and open ocean. Historians now think Morrill likely saw the Antarctic ice shelf, misinterpreted its scale, or embellished his account for notoriety. But his report had the weight of a first-hand witness. It sent other men into danger, chasing a coastline that was probably a shifting wall of ice. Then the Aurora Islands. This small cluster was reported again and again in the South Atlantic, southeast of the Falklands. Sailors gave consistent coordinates. Some claimed to have landed on them. But every official naval expedition sent to verify found nothing, just empty, deep water. The likely explanation is that generations of sailors saw the same recurring mirage. Or a persistent group of gigantic icebergs grounded on a shallow bank that later broke free and drifted away. Each new sighting seemed to confirm the old ones, creating a consensus of error. The whalers' world was one of immediate reality, the weight of a harpoon, the yield of a barrel. Yet their testimonies, passed from ship to ship and onto parchment, created phantoms that outlived them by a century. This was the final ingredient for a ghost island. Not just scholarly error or deliberate fraud, but the honest, hurried observations of tired men at the edge of the known world. Their words hardening into fact long before anyone could check. To clear this legacy, you'd need a new kind of witness, one that never grew tired, never exaggerated, and saw the world without any hope of profit. The witness was a machine, a government machine, so picture a different deck, a Royal Navy survey ship. The air's still sharp with salt, but the chaos is gone. It's quiet, disciplined. In the 19th century, the hunt for phantoms became an official mission. National pride wasn't about claiming blank spaces anymore. It was about cleaning them. Governments set up permanent offices. Britain had the Hydrographic Office. Its duty was clear: to make maps you could trust with a warship. With a trade fleet, with an empire, their product was the Admiralty Chart, a document of such rigorous accuracy it became the global standard. This was a revolution in intent. The map wasn't a collage of rumors now, it was a scientific instrument. The instructions they gave captains like James Cook were explicit. You weren't just to discover new lands. You were to confirm or erase the old ones. Before setting sail, you got a list. Reported islands, shoals, coastlines from old charts. Your orders were to sail to those exact coordinates and look. If you found nothing, you sailed a careful grid around the area, often running down the latitude. That meant sailing east or west along the precise parallel where an island was supposed to sit, leaving no room for longitudinal error. Only after that search could you officially strike it from the record. The tools finally matched the task. John Harrison's marine chronometer solved the longitude puzzle. Now a ship could know its position with certainty. Coastal surveying became a painstaking art, triangulation, taking months to chart a single bay with perfect fidelity. The United States launched its own cleansing project, the United States Exploring Expedition of 1838, led by Lieutenant Charles Wilkes. A squadron of 6 ships spent 4 years crisscrossing the Pacific. Their mandate was scientific, but a core part was cartographic verification. They systematically hunted down reported islands, like the Chimneys, Podesta Island. Time and again, they sailed to the coordinates, conducted exhaustive searches, found only empty ocean. With each erasure, the Pacific chart became a little more real, a little less haunted by the ghosts of earlier reports. This was the first great purge, a top-down, institutional effort to replace myth with measurement. But for all its power, this new system had a blind spot. It could only hunt the ghosts it knew about. The process was slow, ship by ship, ocean by ocean. And some phantoms, woven into the map for centuries, proved almost immune to mere observation. They were protected by something stronger than bad data. Protected by the sheer inertia of belief, by the weight of their own long history on the page. The survey ships could clear the mirages, but they couldn't so easily dismantle a legend. Months at sea, it changes your mind. The horizon is just a line, the food is stale. Everything aches from the damp and the rocking. You're desperate for a sign, for anything that isn't just more blue. That's where the last kind of phantom island comes from, not from a mapmaker or a government, from the sailor's own head. Psychologists have a term for it: expectant attention. Your brain, waiting for something so intensely, starts finding it in the world's noise. On a ship, the map is what sets that up. It says an island is right there at these coordinates. So as you get close, every man is staring out, looking for it. Their perception is already set. A low bank of clouds on the horizon. The mind doesn't see a cloud. It sees the hazy shape of land. A strange, dark patch in the water from a current or a school of fish becomes a distant coast. The brain finishes the picture the map began. It turns maybe into yes. This isn't lying, it's how the mind works. It tries to make order from chaos. Then the first officer shouts, "Land ho," and points. That solidifies it. Others look, and now his certainty guides them. They see it too. It becomes a shared fact on that ship. A collective sighting, written in the log with confidence and exact coordinates. That log entry goes back to port, and it's the newest, strongest proof the island is real. It's a perfect loop. The map creates the expectation. The expectation shapes what you see. What you see confirms the map. Take Doherty Island. All through the 1800s, respected captains reported seeing this large landmass in the far South Pacific. They gave consistent positions, their descriptions agreed. It was on charts for decades, but the ocean floor there is immensely deep, thousands of meters down. An island there is geologically impossible. So what were they seeing? Almost certainly a lasting trick of the atmosphere, maybe a fata morgana that showed up in the same general area. But because the charts said an island should be there, generation after generation of sailors arrived at that stretch of ocean already believing. Their expectant minds turned a shimmering mirage into solid rock and soil. They saw what they needed to see. That shows the deepest layer of this mystery. These places aren't just navigation mistakes or fraud. They're psychological artifacts. They live in the gap between the world as it is and the world as we're convinced it has to be. They're born from our stories, our fears, our desperate hopes on an empty sea. And they're kept alive by the maps that tell us where to look. To finally erase them, you needed more than a better ship or a sharper tool. You needed a way to go around the human eye and the human mind completely. The map turned into a record of power. In the 20th century, it wasn't just about ships moving safely anymore. It was about what was under the water. Oil, gas, minerals, fishing. International law created this new concept, the exclusive economic zone. It meant a country owned the resources in the ocean for 200 miles off its coast. So a small island wasn't just a dot, it was a key that could open up a piece of ocean bigger than some nations. And if that island was a phantom, that didn't mean it was worthless. It could be a placeholder, a bargaining chip drawn in invisible ink. Scholars talk about how a disputed feature, or one that doesn't exist, can be brought into negotiations. A piece of hypothetical geography used to make a real claim. Take Bermuda. This island showed up on Spanish maps in the 16th century, north of the Yucatan. It drifted on and off charts for hundreds of years. Then, in the late 20th century, its possible value became obvious. The Gulf of Mexico was being divided up. The rule was median lines, borders drawn halfway between confirmed land. If Bermuda was real, it would push Mexico's maritime boundary much farther north. That would give Mexico access to a sector potentially rich with oil that the United States claimed. The phantom had a price. The Mexican government sent out searches. Ships, planes, a dedicated oceanographic survey in 1997. They found only deep water where the old charts said land should be. The island that was a marker for Spanish sailors became a ghost in a modern resource fight. Its erasure, confirmed by sonar and satellite, quietly changed a geopolitical and economic picture. This shows a subtle shift. A country might quietly stop pushing a phantom once technology showed it wasn't there, like with Bermuda. Or a country might actively push a dubious claim if it gave even a small strategic edge. The disputes in the South China Sea are a clear, modern example. Here, the history of map accuracy isn't academic. It's directly about sovereignty. Features that were historically noted as submerged banks, or things only visible at low tide, have been turned into permanent artificial islands through land reclamation. The old maps get pulled into courtrooms and diplomatic notes. Each side interprets old, often vague charts to back their modern claims. A dotted line on a 70-year-old map is argued over like a surveyed border. In this context, the phantom isn't just a missing island. It can be an ambiguous historical record, interpreted and amplified to control real geography and vast resources now. So the life of a cartographic ghost goes far beyond being a navigational hazard. It can live a second life in treaties and legal documents. It becomes a symbol, a piece in a much larger game where the prize isn't discovery but control. This shows the final, lasting power of these imagined places. They aren't just mistakes to be fixed, they are possibilities, and as long as a blank space on the map or a contested line in the ocean means power and wealth, the temptation to fill it with a favorable story will always be there. The ocean at that coordinate was just deep blue. In 2012, the Australian ship Southern Surveyor went to a place that wasn't supposed to be there. On all the digital maps, Google Earth included, you could see an island. Sandy Island, it was a pale shape northeast of Australia. Their job was to go and look. They turned on the multi-beam sonar, which maps the seafloor with sound. As they reached the spot, they watched the screens. The depth sounder didn't show any shallowing, no rise. It showed the abyssal plain. The water was over 1,400 meters deep. There was no island. It had never existed. Sandy Island became this perfect modern phantom. It showed how a ghost from the age of sail could live forever digitally. The team traced it back. The first sighting was probably from the whaling ship Velocity in 1876. The captain wrote Sandy Island in his log, just one entry. But that was enough. Over the years, it got copied from one British chart to the next. Each new edition made it seem more real. By the time maps went digital, the island was a fixed fact in the database. The mistake was automated, replicated endlessly with no one checking the source. That's a legacy error, data that was never verified, kept alive by the systems we trust. What the Southern Surveyor did was negative surveying. Proving something isn't there is harder than finding something new. You need systematic evidence. They didn't just pass through, they did a grid search, sonar sweeping the area. The data was clear, the seafloor was flat, no seamount, no plateau, nothing. When they published, people were both delighted and uneasy. Headlines said scientists had undiscovered an island. For some, it was a fun story. For others, it was a quiet shock. If a whole island could stay on maps into the 21st century, what else is wrong? The cleanup was fast. Within days, mapping services deleted Sandy Island. Paper charts were corrected, but that quick fix showed a deeper problem. Our digital maps feel so authoritative. We zoom in and forget there are often layers of old data. The Sandy Island thing started a small audit. People began checking other remote chart entries against satellite images. A few more phantom islands were deleted. It was a pivotal moment. It showed the age of phantom islands wasn't over. It had evolved. The ghosts weren't in the fog anymore. They were in the code. In the legacy datasets we inherited and assumed were clean, technology gave us the tool to catch the mistake, but it was human curiosity that decided to use it. Which raises a final question. As we hand more of our world building to algorithms and aggregated data, who checks the ghosts in the machine? What old errors are we encoding into the maps of the future right now? Sandy Island was a ghost on a server. You could open Google Earth in 2012, look at the Pacific, and it was there, a pale oval shape labeled Sandy Island. It looked as real as Australia. That's the paradox. With a click, you can see a satellite view of your own roof, a view that used to be for gods. That power creates an assumption that we have perfect, total knowledge. We trust the map on the screen more than our own eyes on the horizon. But that digital map isn't a photograph of truth. It's a layer cake of data, and some of those layers are very old. Geographers have a term, cartographic inertia. It's the tendency of information to persist. Just because it's already there, the effort to remove it is greater than the effort to leave it. So a 19th century whaler's log entry becomes a notation on a British Admiralty chart. That chart gets scanned decades later. An algorithm compiling a new world map pulls from that archive, and the phantom is reborn. It gets the sleek, authoritative look of modern design. Its ancient error is now wrapped in pixels, which makes it more convincing than ever. The digital age didn't erase our cartographic ghosts, it automated them. Think about how a modern web map is made. Services like Google Maps, they don't send out survey ships. They're aggregators. They compile data from national hydrographic offices, from forestry services, from old topographic surveys. These sources vary in accuracy in how recently they were updated. The algorithm's job is to stitch them into a seamless whole. It's an act of synthesis, not verification. If two sources disagree, one shows an island, another shows open water, the software might default to showing the island, treating its presence as a positive fact. A fact that overrules an absence, so the ghost wins by default. This highlights a distinction, often overlooked. There's a difference between a reference map and a navigational chart. The map on your phone is a reference, it's for general orientation. A navigational chart for ships and planes is a legal document produced under strict standards. With a stated confidence level, a process for reporting errors, the danger is when the line gets blurred. If a sailor planning a route in a remote area checks a consumer web map and sees an island, that visual might influence their planning subconsciously. Even if they later consult official charts, the phantom injects doubt into a system that can't afford it. So what else is in there? What other anachronisms are beneath the clean interface? It could be a street renamed 50 years ago, still lingering as an alternate label. It could be a building demolished a decade ago, still standing as a gray outline. Or it could be 1,000 smaller versions of Sandy Island. Tiny specks in distant seas that no one has thought to check because the map says they're real. Our new maps are palimpsests, digital parchment where the old writing still shows through. We've gained incredible clarity, but we've also inherited every unverified whisper from the past, each one amplified now by the illusion of infallibility that comes from a high-resolution screen. This forces a new responsibility onto us, the users, to understand that the map is not the territory. It's a story about the territory, and some chapters of that story were written by people staring at clouds, hoping for land. Deleting an island is a formal act. It needs a procedure, a chain of command, a paper trail. It's not just clicking backspace on a picture. So a ship, the Southern Surveyor, comes back with sonar data. It shows a feature that's been on charts for a long time isn't there. That evidence starts moving. It's a slow process, a bureaucratic one. The goal isn't speed, it's certainty, because safety depends on it. Ships, the people on them, that's what it's for. The process starts with a report to a National Hydrographic Office. For Sandy Island, the Australian findings went to France because the island was in a French maritime zone. The French Hydrographic Service had to verify. They'd look at the original source of the error, the whaling log. They'd compare it against all the modern bathymetric data. They might even send one of their own research vessels to do another survey, only after that internal review, only after it confirms the absence beyond any doubt. Then the formal proposal can begin, and this is where international collaboration comes in. The central authority is the International Hydrographic Organization. The IHO, based in Monaco, they maintain the world's authoritative gazetteer, the official list of names for every undersea feature, every oceanic landmark. To change that record, a member state like France submits a formal proposal for deletion. That proposal gets circulated to all the other member states. For review, for comment, there are no unilateral erasures. The system is built on consensus, because a mistake here you could create a new danger where an old one was removed. Once the deletion is approved, the information gets disseminated through notices to mariners. These are weekly updates issued by hydrographic offices around the world. A captain subscribes to these, a shipping company. They contain critical corrections, new wrecks, changed buoy positions, and the removal of non-existent islands. The navigator on a ship is then responsible. They manually update their paper charts, drawing a line through the phantom, noting the correction in the margin. For electronic chart systems, the ones on commercial vessels, the update comes through a standardized digital patch. The ghost is officially exorcised from the professional seafaring world, but that's only the first layer. The real challenge is the ripple effect, the world atlas on a classroom shelf, the mapping service on a smartphone, the database in a car's GPS unit. These are all derivative products. They are many steps removed from the primary source data. From the hydrographic office, there's no global command, no instant sync for every digital map. Each commercial publisher, each tech company, they have to independently receive the correction and choose to implement it in their own product cycle. This is why Sandy Island persisted on public maps for months after it was deleted from official charts. The cleanup is asynchronous, a wave of correction moving at different speeds through different systems. It shows you a fragmented landscape of geographic truth, where the most accurate map is often the one in the hands of a professional navigator, not the one on the public screen. This meticulous, slow-motion revision, it's a testament to a core principle. Cartography at its highest level is a service. Its primary client isn't the curious viewer, it's the person in harm's way. Every step of the protocol, every review, every notice, it's designed to filter out noise, to establish a bedrock of reliable fact. It's a human system, checking itself, and in an age of instant digital updates, its deliberate pace feels almost archaic. Yet that slowness is its strength. It's the difference between a rumor being silenced and a truth being established. It asks you to consider what you lose when you prioritize the speed of information over the weight of its verification. That meticulous erasure leaves a strange space. The coordinates are gone, the charts corrected, but something lingers. A phantom island, once it escapes the map, finds a more permanent home. In our stories, a blank spot on a chart to a writer isn't an error, it's an open invitation, a place where anything can happen. This is where the scientific record ends and the artistic tradition begins. A tradition just as old. For centuries, authors have looked at those gaps and seen not a problem to be solved, but a stage. Sir Thomas More did this in 1516. He needed a setting for a philosophical critique, a model of a perfect community. He couldn't set it in a real country. That was too dangerous, so he invented an island. He called it Utopia. He gave it a detailed geography, a social structure, and he placed it in the New World, the great blank space on the maps of his time. By grounding his fiction in the language of exploration, he made that ideal society feel possible. Just over the horizon, the Phantom Island became a container for a thought experiment. This literary device never lost its power. Jules Verne was obsessed with the unexplored. In the mysterious island, castaways find themselves on an uncharted landmass in the Pacific. The island itself is a character, a puzzle box of hidden resources. It sustains them and challenges them. Verne understood an unmapped island is a laboratory, a place to test human ingenuity away from the rules of the known world. Later, Umberto Eco took this idea to a metaphysical level. In The Island of the Day Before, a shipwrecked man can see a mysterious island but cannot reach it. He's stranded by his inability to calculate longitude. For Eco, the Phantom Island is a symbol of elusive knowledge, a truth that seems visible but stays out of grasp. A direct consequence of cartographic uncertainty, this resonance moves beyond the page. Consider Skull Island from King Kong, the quintessential phantom island of cinema. Not on any map, shrouded in fog, home to creatures from a lost age, it represents the primordial unknown, the terrifying world just beyond the edges of our charts. A place where the rules of nature are rewritten. Video games build entire genres on this. Countless adventures ask players to explore uncharted archipelagos. Ruins, monsters, treasure. The phrase "here be dragons," once a cartographer's note, is now a genre tag. It promises discovery and peril. This appeal reveals a deep human need. As we fill in the blanks on our physical maps, we seem to require new blanks for our psyche. Phantom islands fulfill that need for mystery. They represent the ideal society we cannot build, the lost world we cannot return to, the personal frontier we have yet to conquer. They are spaces for hope, for fear, for wonder. We may delete them from our navigational charts with sonar and data, but we immediately redraw them in the landscapes of our dreams. This creates a duality. The same impulse that drove explorers to find these places and scientists to disprove them also drives us to keep inventing them. The phantom is never truly gone. It just migrates from the atlas to the art, and in that migration it asks a quieter question. In a world where every square inch is catalogued, where do we locate our own private unknowns? What uncharted islands exist not in the ocean but in the territories of our own lives? You walk into a map library and there's a kind of quiet grief in certain corners. A historian might be looking at a chart from 1780, running a finger along the coastline of an island that never actually existed, and to delete that from the modern record it feels, in a way, like a small act of forgetting. But it creates this tension. Are we just correcting an error, or are we erasing a piece of human history, a document of our ambition and our limits? It's not really a debate about geography alone. It's about what we choose to remember. Scholars who study the history of science, they have a perspective. They don't see these phantom islands as mistakes to be purged. They see them as primary sources. Each one is like a fossil, an imprint of a worldview. It tells you what people believed was possible, where they thought the edges of the world might be. The fact that Frisland kept appearing on maps, that tells a story about trust in ancient authorities. The Isle of Demons speaks to real fears, fears of the unknown Atlantic. To remove these features completely from our historical consciousness, you lose a direct line into the minds of the people who sailed by starlight. By hope, it sanitizes the past. It makes discovery seem like a straight, inevitable line toward truth, instead of the messy, stumbling, story-filled journey it actually was. So a practical compromise has emerged, a balance between safety and scholarship. The rule is clear: for active navigational charts, the kind used by ships and planes, accuracy is everything. A phantom island has to be deleted. A life could depend on that clean data. But in historical cartography, in academic study, the phantom is preserved, sometimes even celebrated. Modern historical atlases will often include these features, maybe drawn with a lighter, dashed line, or placed in a sidebar, labeled as a historical misconception. They become map ghosts, included intentionally to tell the fuller story. This practice acknowledges something, that a map is always two things. It's a tool for navigation, and it's a cultural artifact. One demands perfection, the other values context. You can see this in modern interpretive maps of the age of exploration, where the speculative coastlines of Terra Australis or the Sea of the West are rendered in translucent color. Overlaying the accurate geography we know today, it creates a kind of palimpsest. You see both the error and the truth at the same time, and that leads to a question for our own digital age. In our drive for flawless, real-time data, correcting every inconsistency with algorithmic efficiency, what are we stripping away? When a mapping service updates instantly, wiping a centuries-old placeholder from the database, it also wipes the trail. The narrative of how that error got there. We risk creating a present that feels disconnected from the flawed process that built it. So maybe the goal isn't a perfectly clean map. Maybe it's a wise map, one that knows when to be definitive for safety and when to be transparent about its own long, haunted human history. Some of these phantoms just won't go away. They stay in the archives, not as clear mistakes, but as questions, unsettling questions. These are the cartographic cold cases, places where the evidence is contradictory but credible enough. Enough to keep a door open just slightly. They don't fit a simple binary, not real, not fake. They exist in a gray zone, a zone of maybe. Take Podesta Island. 1879, an Italian ship, the Podesta, sailing west of Chile. The captain reported an island, a small, low island. He gave precise coordinates. This wasn't an old sailor's story. This was a modern log entry from a commercial vessel. The report was taken seriously. It went on British Admiralty charts for decades, but every expedition sent to check found nothing, just the deep Pacific swells. So what did the Podesta crew see? Oceanographers have a theory. The region is volcanically active. A submarine volcano could have erupted, briefly, violently. It might have breached the surface just long enough to create a temporary island. Ash and pumice, then, within months or years, the waves would have eroded it away. The sighting was real. The island was just temporary, a geological event. Mistaken for a permanent feature. Then there's Thompson Island in the South Atlantic. This one has a stranger file, reported in the early 1800s. Searched for all through the 19th century, nothing, case closed. Then the 1950s, a hydrographic survey, a puzzling sonar return, a significant shallow seamount. Right near the historical coordinates of Thompson Island, the data suggested a submerged plateau, its summit not far below the waves. Could this be the remnant? The eroded remnant of the lost island. The evidence is tantalizing but inconclusive, enough to keep the file active, a low-priority mystery. These stories force a wider definition of a phantom. It's not always a story versus the truth. Sometimes it's a snapshot of a planet in motion. Sea levels have risen and fallen over millennia. A coastal plain 10,000 years ago is now a continental shelf underwater. Tectonic plates subduct, pulling entire sections of crust down. Other plates collide, pushing new land up in geological slow motion. An island could have existed where now there's only abyssal plain. The record of it might be a sedimentary layer or a fossilized coral reef, not a line on parchment. The myth and the reality blur when you consider deep time, and the ocean itself can craft decoys. Convincing decoys beyond mirages. It can make physical objects that mimic land. A pumice raft, an underwater volcano erupts. It ejects cubic kilometers of porous rock. Buoyant rock, it forms a floating mat kilometers across to a ship in poor light. A pumice raft looks like a barren shore. It even feels solid if you try to land on it. Or in tropical regions, vast tangles of vegetation, floating islands. They break free from river deltas, woven together by roots and soil. They can support trees. Drift for years. They are land in a sense, but they are not fixed. They are passengers on the current. A sailor could chart one, return a year later. Find the coordinates empty. These remaining mysteries do something. They humble our modern certainty. They remind us the ocean is not a static map. It's a dynamic system. Living, it creates and destroys. It hides and reveals. Our charts are a best guess, a snapshot of a moment in an endless process. The search for these cold case islands continues. Not with sailing ships, with multi-beam sonar, satellite altimetry, detecting minute changes in sea surface height, changes caused by submerged mountains. We are still looking because the possibility remains that some of these phantoms were not errors of perception. They were witnesses to a fleeting, real event. In the life of our planet, a single, transient moment of solid ground in the blue. The satellite sees it all, a sensor like Landsat up there in orbit, picking up sunlight bouncing off the ocean. Every atoll, every piece of coral, every rock, it's all recorded with this cold, digital clarity. There's no bias in the lens. It doesn't expect anything. It just records what's there, so it becomes the final word. the last say in this long search for phantoms. The era of undiscovered islands is over. We've built eyes that can stare at every patch of blue on Earth and never blink. The main tools are satellite altimetry and synthetic aperture radar. They don't just take pictures, they measure. Altimetry sends a radar pulse down to the sea surface. The time it takes to come back tells the satellite the exact distance to the water, and by mapping these tiny changes in height across the whole ocean, scientists can figure out the shape of the seafloor below. A huge underwater mountain, a seamount, it has a slight gravitational pull. It gathers water around itself, making a tiny bulge on the ocean's surface. The satellite can see that bulge. That's how we find things hidden under miles of water. Synthetic aperture radar goes even further. It can see through clouds and darkness. It makes detailed images of surface texture. It can spot a ship's wake, an oil slick, and crucially, it can see the pattern of waves interacting with a shallow reef or a shoal just below the surface. From space, we can see the ghosts of islands that haven't broken the surface in thousands of years. But to really settle it, you have to go down. You need sound. That's multi-beam bathymetric sonar. It's towed behind a research ship. It sends out a fan of acoustic beams straight down to the seabed. It measures the echo return time for each beam, and it builds a precise, three-dimensional map of the ocean floor. It paints the abyss in high resolution. A phantom island can't hide from that acoustic spotlight. It shows canyons, plains, seamounts in such detail that the old paper charts look like rough sketches. Places like the Scripps Institution of Oceanography have led global mapping projects. Their ships have sailed systematic grids across areas that used to be full of rumors on maps. Mission after mission comes back with the same definitive data. Deep water where the map said land should be. Dozens of phantoms from the Pacific to the Southern Ocean have been erased by these sonar sweeps. But the process isn't only about deletion. Sometimes technology performs a rescue. In 2023, a survey off Greenland looked at a tiny, disputed speck called Kekatak Avanalek. For years, no one was sure, was it a permanent island or just a gravel bank at low tide? Using GPS and sonar, the research team confirmed it. It was a small, stable island of bedrock. It was almost written off as a phantom, but technology verified it was real. That dual role is important. The same tools that scour the ocean to disprove myths are also the ones that certify truth. They give a final, objective verdict. We're at the edge of a fully mapped planet. The blue spaces on the globe are being filled with data, petabytes of exacting data. Not with guesses or stories. The romantic idea of a lost island, waiting for a lone sailor to find it, has been cornered by science. But in getting this total clarity, we might have closed a kind of door. The door to a world that was just a little bit bigger than what we knew. That final verdict from space and sonar, it feels absolute, but the ocean has a defense. Depth, we've mapped the surface of Mars better than our own seafloor. That's a staggering fact. It means the greatest frontier left on Earth isn't in space. It's under the waves, the abyssal plains, the trenches, the mountain ranges hidden under miles of water. These places are less known to us than the moon's craters. This final unknown is where the last phantoms could be, not islands above the waves, but secrets in the dark. Think of that landscape. It's an alien world. Hydrothermal vents, chimneys of mineral spewing superheated water, ecosystems that thrive on chemistry, not sunlight, and seamounts, solitary underwater mountains rising thousands of meters from the plain. Many have never been seen, not by human eyes, not by instruments. Our best global map of the ocean floor isn't a photograph, it's a model, an educated guess. It uses satellite data, measuring tiny bumps in the ocean's surface, caused by the gravitational pull of massive features below, but the resolution is coarse. About 1.5 kilometers per pixel, so anything smaller than a small mountain could be missed. It's a map of general shapes, not fine detail, that has direct implications for phantom islands. A seamount just a few hundred meters below the surface could have fooled a sailing ship. The water above it behaves differently. Currents change, the sea state gets confused. To a sailor with a lead line, a sudden shallowing might feel like land. In heavy weather or fog, that sensory data could solidify. An island was here. They marked it, then later expeditions with better tools find only deep water. The seamount was real, the island was the phantom. The mismatch was in interpretation, not in the observation of something unusual. This recognition has launched a modern quest, the final chapter in replacing myth with measurement. It's called the Seabed 2030 Project, a collaboration between the Nippon Foundation and GEBCO, the General Bathymetric Chart of the Oceans. Their goal is simple and ambitious: to map 100% of the global seafloor by 2030, not with satellite models but with high-resolution sonar. From ships, from autonomous vehicles, it's a staggering undertaking, sharing data across nations, sending robotic mappers into the deepest trenches, painting the last blank canvas on our planet. This project is the direct descendant of those 19th century Admiralty surveys. The same drive for a complete chart, but the scale is cosmic. They're not just hunting ghosts from old logs. They're building the first true portrait of a hidden world. Every new seamount they chart, every canyon they detail, is a permanent entry in a new ledger. It's the end of the age of cartographic mystery, in the most literal sense. Yet in its grandeur, the project underscores the ocean's enduring power. Even with a full map, the deep sea keeps its mystery. Knowing the shape of the bottom isn't the same as understanding the life there, or the geology that shifts it, or the stories it holds. The phantoms of the future won't be islands on the surface. They'll be unexplained sounds, creatures glimpsed by a submersible's light, formations that challenge our assumptions. The ocean concedes its shape, but not its secrets. And in that, there's a quiet consolation. Even when every inch is measured, some magic remains. In the sheer scale of the unknown we have finally, truly seen. Jorge Luis Borges wrote about an empire where the mapmakers became so precise that their map ended up being the exact size of the territory. It covered everything. The Phantom Island is the opposite of that. It's a mark on the map that covers nothing. But for a long time, it had the same power as a real place. That tells you something about how we build what we call truth. A phantom island isn't just an error, it's a case study. It shows how a belief, once it gets into an authoritative system and a community of practice reinforces it, can become incredibly resilient. Those old cartographers weren't fools. They were part of a tradition. They trusted the work of the people who came before them. If a respected chart showed an island called Frisland, to question it was to question their whole shared understanding. The mistake was kept alive not by one person's lie, but by a network of trust, by professional consensus. The island existed because the community agreed it existed. And you see this mechanism far beyond old maps. In medicine, centuries ago, practices based on incomplete understanding were passed down. They shaped care in profound ways. Or in historical narratives, where one influential account could solidify a perspective, later research would have to slowly, painstakingly correct it. In each case, a form of knowledge becomes institutionalized. It's taught, it's reproduced, it's defended. It gains the weight of tradition. Uprooting it takes more than one piece of contrary evidence. It often takes a paradigm shift, a new way of seeing that makes the old belief not just wrong but incomprehensible. Our world now is built on digital systems, but the pattern is the same. We live in an infosphere full of its own phantoms. A piece of misinformation, once it gets into the algorithms and the social networks that are our modern charts, it can replicate with terrifying speed. It gains authority through repetition, through endorsement. It creates its own community of belief. These digital phantoms, whether it's forged media or baseless claims, they're sustained by the same social dynamics that kept Sandy Island on the map. They're hard to correct not because the truth isn't available, but because the system itself has been configured to accept the fiction as part of its landscape. So the lesson of the Phantom Island is really a lesson in humility. It asks us to look at the maps we use to navigate our lives, our news sources, our historical frameworks, our scientific consensus, and to remember they are human creations. They're the best models we have, built from observation and interpretation and sometimes hope. They are not the territory. The real territory is always more complex, more fluid, and often more empty of our projections than we want to admit. To mistake the map for the world is to risk sailing for a coast that will never appear. But to distrust every chart is to be lost at sea. The balance is in knowing that every representation is a story we tell ourselves about reality, and some of the most persistent stories are about places that never were. The cost of a ghost is measured in coal and in time and in that deep blue. A shipping company gets its charts in the 1920s. The route from London to New York shows a known hazard, a large island named Frisland. So the navigator plots a course to give it a wide berth. The ship burns extra fuel for days. The crew works extra hours, all to avoid a landmass that had vanished from the physical world 2 centuries before. The Phantom was gone, but its shadow still lengthened across the ocean, dictating movement, consuming resources. That was the quiet toll of a cartographic era. It was never just lines on paper. It was about the real-world economy that moved upon those lines. Logistics experts today can put a number on it, a suboptimal route. Even a small diversion, adding just hours to a voyage, means thousands of dollars in extra fuel, and then you multiply that, countless ships over decades altering course for a Phantom. The cumulative waste is staggering. In the age of sail, the stakes were existential. Expeditions were funded, ships provisioned, crews committed to years-long voyages. All based on maps promising lands of spice or treasure. The search for the Northwest Passage, fueled by maps showing open channels where there was only ice. It consumed fortunes, it consumed lives. These were monumental investments chasing cartographic mirages. The resources poured in timber, iron, food, human ambition were monumental sums lost to a collective dream drawn in ink. The environmental impact is a quieter ledger. Consider the search parties. An explorer's report of a new island sends a rescue ship years later, combing an empty quadrant of sea for a base camp that never was. Each mile sailed by those search vessels burned fuel, each day consumed provisions, all for a rescue mission where the lost were lured by a map. Now, scientific resources are finite. Oceanographic research vessels are expensive, their time scheduled years in advance. To dedicate a week of such a ship's mission to verifying a persistent chart error, like Sandy Island, is a week not spent on a real coral reef, or tracking a current, or monitoring an ecosystem. The Phantom consumes opportunity. It diverts attention from the known, pressing mysteries of the deep. This demand for flawless geography is now an industrial imperative. Our underwater infrastructure depends on it. Before a single mile of transoceanic cable is laid, the bathymetric maps have to be perfect. A seamount missed by old data could snag and rupture the cable, severing global communications. The placement of offshore wind farms requires a precise understanding of the seafloor. An error from an old chart could mean anchoring a billion-dollar turbine platform on unstable ground. Accurate maps are the bedrock of our blue economy. They guide sustainable fishing by defining the underwater topography where ecosystems thrive. They help model ocean currents and climate patterns, which depend on the precise shape of the basins that contain them. The ghost of Frisland offers a subtle example. Its persistent, misplaced mass on charts likely distorted the early understanding of North Atlantic currents and fisheries. Navigators expecting its coastlines would misinterpret drift, potentially missing rich fishing grounds or sailing into hazardous conditions. The phantom didn't just occupy space on a page. It occupied space in the maritime mind, warping the practical knowledge of an entire ocean for generations. Correcting these errors is more than an academic exercise. It's a continuous calibration. Every phantom erased from the chart saves fuel, protects investments, frees scientific inquiry to focus on the tangible wonders of the real sea. It turns the map from a story we inherit into a tool we can truly use, one that respects both the limits of our resources and the depths we are still trying to understand. A whale comes up next to a ship. Its body is wrapped around the hull, but this isn't from a sailor's journal. It's from the border of a map made in 1539. To call these things just bad science is to miss the point. For a long time, a map was a canvas where what we knew met what we imagined, where geography served beauty. The blank parts of the parchment weren't just missing information, they were voids. An empty sea suggested a limit to human knowledge, and that was an uncomfortable idea, especially when the world seemed to be getting bigger. So the mapmaker's pen didn't stop. It filled the unknown with art, with symbolic creatures, with elaborate script. A phantom island seen this way wasn't always a mistake. Sometimes it was a deliberate flourish, something to balance the page, to tell a story, or just to avoid the dread of leaving a space empty. Art historians point to someone like Olaus Magnus. His Carta Marina is a key example. Published in 1539, it charts the Nordic regions, but you look at it and the water is full of life, serpents longer than galleons. Whales spouting on the land, there are kings holding court, scenes from daily life. These weren't warnings for navigation, they were a visual encyclopedia. A way to show the character of a place, its dangers, its wonders, its work, through pictures. A phantom coastline here, a mythical city there, they had a teaching purpose. They educated the viewer about the world's rumored marvels. They inspired wonder and fear. The map was a portal to something extraordinary. This artistic impulse had a practical relative. Mapmakers on land had a trick. They would insert a completely fake town into their work, a small, invented village with a unique name. If a competitor's map later showed that same imaginary place, it was clear proof of copying. A copyright trap woven right into the landscape. That practice was called a paper town or a trap street, and it sailed out to sea too. It became the paper island. An artistic creation with a defensive purpose. To see this is to see the mapmaker not just as a surveyor, but as a storyteller and a businessperson. Their work had to be accurate enough to use, but beautiful enough to want, and clever enough to protect its value. The compass roses in the corners of these charts weren't just for direction. They were explosions of color and design. The cartouches that framed the titles were like elaborate sculptures done in ink. Even the lettering for place names was an art form. This drive for aesthetics created a world that was richer than the real one, more dramatic, more morally clear. Sea monsters patrolled the edges of the known world, guarding the passages to the strange. Paradise was often drawn as an actual place right at the map's edge. These choices weren't about lying, they were about meaning. They answered a deep human need. To see the world as a coherent place, a place with stories, where every empty space held potential, not for a trade route but for a legend. This artistic story provides a necessary balance. It reminds us that our drive to chart the world has always been paired with our need to beautify it, to mythologize it, to make it resonate with the stories we tell about ourselves. The phantom in that light isn't a mistake to fix. It's a brushstroke in a grand collective self-portrait. And if the map is a portrait, then the empty spaces it once feared, those have become the most difficult canvas of all. The map becomes a classroom. These errors that keep showing up, these ghosts, they're not just curiosities, they're a tool for teaching something we really need now. Critical thinking. A phantom island is a lesson in media literacy before anyone called it that. It shows you visually how one report that wasn't checked can become a fact everywhere. How authority can lock a story in place, and how hard it is finally to fix it. This isn't about old charts, it's a blueprint for our own information age. So teachers have started using these ghosts as an entry point. Imagine the activity. You give students two maps of the same ocean. One is a modern satellite map. The other is a naval chart from the 1800s. Their job is to compare, to hunt for what's different, and they find it. A solid landmass on the old map is just open water on the new one. That moment of discovery, it's powerful. It makes misinformation tangible. You can point to the phantom. You can trace its path from a sailor's logbook to a digital file. And the lesson comes out of that. Question your sources, understand verification. See that even the most authoritative systems we have, old atlases, new algorithms, they contain old errors. They are built by people, they inherit the assumptions and the mistakes. This connects to the scientific method too. A phantom island is a hypothesis. The hypothesis says the island is right here at these coordinates. The test is the survey, sending a ship or looking at satellite data. The result is the evidence. And the conclusion is the revision. The island gets taken off the map. That sequence shows science isn't a set of fixed facts. It's a process of questioning and correction. Being wrong isn't a failure, it's a step toward being right. You can go further into psychology. The story shows cognitive biases that still trap us. Take confirmation bias. A sailor approaches coordinates where his chart says an island should be. His mind is ready to see land, so when he sees a low bank of clouds on the horizon, his brain doesn't see a cloud. It sees a hazy coast. His expectation shapes what he sees, and his logged sighting then confirms the error for everyone else. That expectant attention of those sailors mirrors what we do now. We approach information with beliefs we already have. We go to sources that confirm what we already think. We interpret unclear evidence to support our view. Seeing this pattern in an old story makes it easier to see in ourselves. By turning this curiosity into a skill, we do something important. We empower people to be better navigators. Not of the ocean, but of the sea of information we're all in. We give them tools to ask where a claim came from. Has it been verified, or is it just being copied? What's the primary source, and what biases are in it? The Phantom Island teaches you to look for the sonar data behind the pretty map, to value the slow work of verification over the fast spread of a good story. In a world full of digital phantoms, that might be the most important voyage any of us can take. The cartographer's workshop has a different energy now. It's processing a global data stream. We're building maps that breathe. They're living documents updated by a constant pulse. Information from satellites, from drones, from the transponders on every cargo ship crossing an ocean. That's the future of mapping, a world free of old ghosts. Machine learning algorithms are the new surveyors. You train them on centuries of material. Historical charts, logbooks, satellite imagery. Their task is to find anomalies, features that appear inconsistently, features that conflict with modern bathymetric data. They flag those as high-priority phantoms for human investigation. It's a systematic purge, a digital purge of inherited error, and alongside the machines, there's a human network. Crowdsourced platforms. A sailor on a container ship can report a discrepancy. A researcher on a coastal survey. They use a smartphone photo and a GPS tag. The chart showed a buoy that isn't there. There's a new shoal where the map shows clear water. That report goes into a global verification feed. It creates a living layer of ground truth over the official data. It turns every person on the water into a sensor, a node in a vast collaborative nervous system for the planet. But this fusion, this powerful fusion of artificial intelligence and collective intelligence, it brings its own challenges. The same technology that can erase phantoms could invent new ones. Researchers warn about deepfake geography. Sophisticated algorithms could generate convincing but entirely fictitious terrain. They could manipulate satellite imagery or sonar data. If a fabrication like that entered the data stream without a clear digital provenance, without a trail of authenticating metadata, it could become a next-generation phantom. Born not from mirage or myth but from code, the defense against that is the same provenance. Every piece of data in the future map has to carry its birth certificate. A record of its source, its creation method, every change it has undergone. We have to be able to trust the lineage of the line on the screen. Imagine the bridge of a ship decades from now. The navigator isn't looking at a paper chart. It's an augmented reality display. It shows the verified, real-time seafloor in crisp detail. But with a gesture, a transparency slider appears. They slide it, and ghostly outlines fade into view. The coastlines of Frisland, the shape of Sandy Island. These aren't presented as truth. They're historical artifacts layered over the reality for context. For learning, the phantom isn't a hazard to navigation anymore. It's a lesson in the display. That vision suggests the quest for the perfect map is evolving. It's no longer about creating a single, definitive picture. It's about building a dynamic, intelligent, participatory process. A process that values absolute clarity for safety and the rich, flawed history that brought us here. The map becomes a conversation between the past and the present, between the algorithm and the human eye, between the central authority and the crowd on the water. And in that endless collaborative correction, you find a new kind of accuracy. It's humble, it's adaptive, it's alive. There's a certain ache to a map that has no blank spaces left. The old charts, the ones with sea monsters along the margins, those speculative coastlines, they carried a kind of promise that past the edge of what was known, anything could still be out there. A phantom island wasn't just an error. It was a placeholder for hope, really, a small declaration in ink that the world wasn't finished, that it still held secrets big enough to lose yourself in. We swapped those blanks for flawless data, and in that trade we might have retired a particular kind of dream. Alain de Botton pointed this out, that journeys lose some of their allure when the destination isn't a question mark anymore. When it's just a pin on a screen you can examine from your chair. The Phantom Island was that question mark, the possibility of an undiscovered country. A personal frontier just over the horizon of what everyone else knew. Erasing it isn't just a cartographic correction. On some level, it feels like a door closing. An admission that the age of finding new lands, that's over, truly over. What fills that space now isn't mystery, it's management. We've gone from being explorers to administrators of a planet we think we've fully accounted for. And that shift brings a subtle claustrophobia. When every mountain has a name, every ocean depth has been sounded, the world starts to feel like a completed puzzle. There's no terra incognita left on Earth, only data sets waiting to be optimized. Now, this complete knowledge brings huge practical benefits: safety, efficiency, understanding. But there's a romantic part that might wonder if something essential to the human spirit needs a little darkness at the edges. The great adventurers talked about this. Sir Edmund Hillary didn't climb Everest because its height was unknown. He climbed it because its summit was unconquered. The mystery was in the human experience of the place, not the place itself. So our exploration has turned inward or outward. We chart the microscopic frontiers of genetics now, the neural pathways of the brain. We build virtual worlds where we invent the rules of geography. We point sensors at Mars, at the moons of Jupiter, looking for new blanks to fill. These are profound endeavors, but they lack that visceral, accessible mystery. A blank spot on a map that anyone with a sturdy ship and enough courage might one day sail toward to see for themselves. The eradication of the Phantom Island symbolizes this transition. We've solved the great practical riddles of our planet's surface. The mysteries that remain are either too small to see or impossibly far away. The Phantom, in its stubborn wrongness, was the last echo of a world big enough to hide continents. We might miss them, not for their falsehood, but for what they represented, the enduring possibility that we might still be wrong, that the world could still surprise us. In a time of perfect digital maps, where do we locate our own personal terra incognita? High Brassel, appearing every 7 years in fog. Sandy Island, a digital ghost erased by sonar. These weren't just mistakes, they came from a mix the limits of what we can see, national ambition, imagination, and the ocean's own tricks. They're more than curiosities. They're reminders our maps aren't just records of the world, they're records of our understanding, flawed, aspirational. A map is a snapshot of a conversation between what we think we know and what's actually there. And for centuries, that conversation had hopeful whispers in it. These phantoms teach humility. They show how a single unverified report can be copied, endorsed, made official. How a community of trust can cement a fiction into accepted fact. The error becomes invisible because everyone agrees it's true, but the same story has a counterforce. The drive to correct course, the slow work of the survey ship, the patient satellite, the push to scrub the record clean, it shows we can correct ourselves. Now we're mapping the whole planet. The Seabed 2030 project is painting the last dark canvas. These cartographic ghosts are a lasting metaphor. The quest for truth is never finished. It's a perpetual voyage, and the most dangerous illusions aren't the monsters at the map's edge. They're the quiet assumptions we've stopped questioning. The features we accept because they've always been on our charts, so reflect on that. What uncharted islands might exist in your own mental maps? What beliefs have you inherited? What coordinates do you follow that a more careful survey might show is just open water?